Good evening, everybody. Let's get another round of applause for Sara Dosa, Shane Boris, and a special guest tonight who you also heard in the film, Miranda July. This was such a profoundly beautiful film. It was a haunting film. I thought it was an inspiring film. I've seen it 3 times now. I don't think I've ever felt so small and vulnerable and also so sort of inspired and emboldened at the same time. The work that you did, that the 3 of you did, and that your colleagues did is incredible. And before getting into how you put the film together, the sort of the philosophy behind it, the thesis behind it, I just want to start with the raw material. And with you, Sara, how were you introduced to the story of Maurice and Katya and to the footage, and what compelled you to pursue this project?
Thank you so much for that question and those incredibly kind words. Right before we get going, I just want to acknowledge another one of our producers, Ina Fitchman, is here. I don't know exactly where she is because it's quite dark, but I want to clap for her and our entire team at National Geographic Films, including our executive producer, Carolyn Bernstein. This is such a team effort, and I just really want to first and foremost shout that out. I first met Katya and Maurice actually when Shane and I and one of our editors, Aaron Casper, we were working on the last film we made. That's a film entitled The Seer and the Unseen. And it's a film that was shot in Iceland that tells the story of an Icelandic woman who is in communication with spirits of nature. We think of that film as a film that is magically real. And we wanted to open it with kind of beguiling imagery of a world that was in the making, and volcanoes do that so exquisitely. So we started doing archival research on erupting volcanoes in Iceland, and that's how we first learned about Katya and Maurice crash, because not that many people had shot erupting volcanoes in Iceland. Once we saw their imagery, there's something just spectacular and otherworldly about it, where we instantly knew this is different. But it was really once we learned about them as a couple, that they were in love with each other and so passionately in love with the earth, we thought there's something different here. And as a filmmaker, I'm just always looking for stories that are about kind of the human relationship with non-human nature, especially when there's kind of an allegorical or mythic dimension. And I felt like this relationship, they literally had a love triangle with this elemental force that seems like such a phenomenally mythical type of story, and one that perhaps would be one that we would want to explore. So that's kind of how the ball got rolling on making Fire of Love.
And then the footage, I mean, the amount of footage here, as you said at the beginning of the film, the footage, the photographs, how did you get your hands on those? What was the process by which you sort of got the material?
We did a bit of research and found out that the hundreds of hours that Katya and Maurice themselves shot resided in an archival facility called Image Est in Nancy, France. And Bertrand Kraft, who's Maurice's older brother, had to give approval over any project that wanted to utilize that footage. And luckily, he liked our approach, and we worked with Image Est to digitize 200 hours, the complete collection that they had, along with hundreds or thousands of still photographs that Katya primarily took. And getting to work with that was just absolutely extraordinary. There was also about 50 hours of Katya and Maurice appearing on the news in France, on variety shows in Belgium, throughout kind of Francophone Europe. They were celebrities during that time, and so there was a visual imprint of them. And getting to work with that material, thanks to the extraordinary research of our archival producer, Nancy Marcotte, added so much, because the 16 millimeter footage that they themselves shot had no sound. And so this other batch of material, we got to hear them talk. There was only one real interview of the 2 of them together that survived, but that was critical for seeing some of their dynamics play out on screen.
That's incredible. And Shane, maybe you can speak to this as well, but you note in the film that they themselves are filmmakers, even if they didn't readily want to admit that always. Did you feel any sort of as you were going through and selecting the footage you were going to use, did you feel sort of what was your relationship like with that? Because certainly they had their own intentions with the film and the footage, and they had their own sort of story that they probably felt they were telling, and you know, in a way what they did, they were also performers. Did you feel an obligation to that? How did you decide to tell the story the way you told it?
Yeah, they were celebrated in their day as scientists, and that's clear in the film, that's clear in the footage and the books that they wrote. But for us, it was also incredibly clear that they were artists in their own right. They were filmmakers. They were inspired by scientists, but they were also inspired by the French New Wave, by existentialist writers and avant-garde writers in France at the time. And it was really important for us to include that side of their personality. Both the philosophical, the absurdist, and also the very diligent, meticulous scientist. But for us, when we were building out the story, we also recognized that they were leaving, their footage was for scientific purposes, but they were also leaving an archive, a record of their lives for posterity, and creating a myth of themselves. They were so interested in mythology of volcanoes, but they also understood that in order to teach people, in order to create a sense of care and understanding for the natural world, there also needed to be a story, and also needed to be this larger-than-life myth. And they were incredibly profound artists in constructing that myth.
I want to come back to the story and the myth, but in terms of the storytelling, Miranda, I saw you wrote, I believe it was on Instagram, you said that narrating this film was like walking a tightrope, and there seemed to be a sort of intensity to the act of narration itself, and I wonder what you meant by that and what it was like for you to tell this story.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's like I'm in a little booth. They've obviously just killed themselves making this thing, and now here's me, and it's just like really wanting to just capture it, and all you have is your voice, right? And you were so great. I remember, I'm sitting there alone in the booth, and you guys would kind of confer, and then you'd say, and I'd be like, okay, this is gonna be a big note. And then you'd just say like the most littlest, delicate thing, like, I'm trying to remember something you actually said. I can't remember. And I'd be like, oh, I got it. Just like chomping at the bit, like I know just what you mean, which is I'm a director too, and I was like, oh right, this is good directing, where you give just enough. It's almost like a vaccine or homeopathy or something. You give just enough that your own immune response kicks in. You don't want to do it for me. And that's what it was like. And it was so emotional too. I mean, I think both the exhaustion and the devotion at that point in a movie is emotional, and then the story in it would kind of come in waves. Like I'd be saying it, and then it would kind of just hit me like them, and like I'd get a little lost, and so some of that emotion is like not acting. It's like it's not a role, right? When you're so you were so great at that. Yeah.
I'm getting very emotional over here. Thank you, Miranda.
How did this come together, you narrating the film? Sarah, I don't know if you want.
I should actually back up and say at the very beginning, we didn't think we wanted narration for Fire of Love. We wanted the archives to speak for themselves. However, it was important for us to tell a love story that was given to us by Katya and Maurice themselves and confirmed by the research that we did. And by given to us by Katya and Maurice, I mean, there's a sentence in a book that Maurice wrote where he says, for me, Katya and volcanoes, it is a love story. And now that's at the end of our film, but for us, it was really a genesis point and in interpreting this vast legacy. And the more research we did, the more it was confirmed that yes, the love story was perhaps the truest way to interpret the Crafts archive. But we were looking at this extraordinary footage, and it was very limited, and at the same time, it was spectacular, but had tremendous challenges. And we knew that if we were going to tell this love story, we would need another narrative vehicle to do so, and we thought narration would be an appropriate way to do that, especially since kind of a playful, subjective narrator is one of the hallmark styles of the French New Wave, which was the aesthetic and cultural movement that formed the backdrop of their own kind of landscape as they came of age. But at first we thought we wanted a French narrator, and then in a brainstorming session, one of our executive producers said, okay, this is not a French idea, but what about Miranda July? And instantly we're all just like, oh my God, that would be perfect. Miranda's work has inspired me deeply for as long. I first saw Me, You, and Everyone We Know, I believe in 2006. It came out in 2005. And as soon as I saw it, it was just like, this is a person who sees the world fundamentally differently and is able to kind of discern like transcendent beauty and like the intimacy of everyday relationships, whether it's like, when you're like passing by someone in the hall and there's like that magical moment that seems like it's gonna last forever, or it's you find someone that you end up walking the rest of your life with. I just feel like your work captures the dynamism and unique. I could go on and on and on, but I'll just say I love Miranda's work, and it's influenced me and our entire team deeply. And so once the suggestion came about, it was like we couldn't think of anything else, and we almost felt like we were writing for Miranda without even realizing it. And then once we first met and had our first conversations, that was all the more confirmed. But yeah, that's just from my perspective.
Yeah, right. I mean, I was just just like emailed this link to this footage, and it's not like that's what I do, narrate volcano movies, but I did so you're kind of like, well, I don't want to get into this if I'm going to be bad, No one's going to be like, why haven't you narrated a volcano movie, And when I watched it, I had a weird, and it was just a rough, I think actually at that point it was just a teaser reel or something, and I had a weird emo response. I was like kind of crying, and I was like, okay, that's odd because it is just lava, and then I remember talking to you, and I was like, oh, it's her, like this works in documentaries just like in any other art form or movie, like there is someone's soul coming through here, and it's vulnerable, and it's had pain, and it's loved, and like that's, there's a real person here. I'm not just gonna be like hanging out with archival footage, which, as amazing as it is, as a living person, you want to know someone will be there. And yeah, so it was kind of obvious from there, like, okay, well, what an honor, really, actually, like it kind of flipped into like, I get to do this. Yeah.
This sort of reaction, which is just as a viewer, is not dissimilar from the reaction I felt. There is something so incredible about this relationship between humans and nature and this incredible force. And as you said, Sarah, this is something that you guys have pursued a lot. What is it about the relationship between humans and nature in the films that you've done? Where does that interest come from? What have you learned along the way?
I'll start, but I've collaborated with Shane for a long time, so I really want you to chime in. I think for me, I'm endlessly curious by how humans make meaning out of and with nature. Not just kind of the awe and wonderment and beauty, but also like the profound kind of sentience of our natural world. And I could go on and on and on about the centuries of violence and damage that have come forth from stories and practices that teach us that humans are separate from nature. And so I think that storytelling that can instead show the aliveness, the sentience, and the interconnectivity of all life is profoundly powerful. And as a storyteller, which I'm so lucky, like I get to be as a profession, that's something that just really drives me. it might sound cheesy, but I really just, it's like that intuitive, like heart-expanding feeling when you come across stories that do that and imagery that does that, and you get to just dwell in the awe and wonderment. But I also do think it's of political importance too, to showcase, to add imagery to stories that have been doing that for hundreds, thousands of years. I feel like with Fire of Love, it was kind of a dream project to have this couple that was literally in love with the fiery earth, and to get to use their images and words to tell that story, and as a way to conjure empathy for our planet, which is in dire need of empathy right now. I think those are some of the reasons that I feel so lucky to have gotten to work on this film, and with collaborators who I've learned from so deeply in that regard as well. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, I would just say one of the most incredible things about Sara's work, and also about Maurice and Katya, is there's a different orientation toward the fear of the unknown, fear of a sort of existential uncertainty. I think a lot of people will move away from uncertainty. But in this film, and in Sara's other films, and certainly in the lives of Maurice and Katya, there's an intimacy with that unknown, and an attempt to move closer to greater understanding, even though you know you'll never fully understand. And I think that's a truly beautiful way to inhabit life. It's a beautiful way to experience our natural world, which isn't serene, is wild and uncertain. And when we recognize it, and when we move toward it, as an object of scientific study that we love, but also as a being, a living being that we want to get closer to. As Sara said, that to us is the root of the hope to care for our planet.
I thought one of the most beautiful lines in the movie is about the notion of understanding as another name for love. I should say that the unknown is something that, I forgot to introduce myself, I'm a journalist. So the unknown is something that plagues me every day. My name is Dylan Byers. I work at Puck Media. You guys did such an incredibly artful job of presenting this search for more understanding and for more meaning, without, I think, really, I think with keeping in mind the fact that some things are always elusive, and that all of this footage and these photographs raise more questions than they do answers. I wonder, after spending all of this time with the footage, and the story of Maurice and Katya, what remains elusive to you about their story?
I mean, I just want more footage of just them in like the kitchen, and where's, I mean, I know that's not, but right? I don't know. Obviously, you should be answering this question. But yeah, and I want to see them fight, and I want to see them, the whole relationship. But that's what the imagination's for. Yeah.
I absolutely echo that. I would have loved to have seen footage of that. Those are questions we had all the time, and we asked those to their friends and loved ones, who affirmed, yes, there was conflict, yes, there were fights. There's some great stories actually about time in their kitchen, but we never had that observational footage, which I so long for. I think one of the greatest challenges, if not the greatest challenge of making this film, was that Katya and Maurice passed nearly 32 years ago, and we just longed to ask them so many things. There's like an unrequitedness to our process. It's like the more we learned about them, the more we realized we could never know, and that's kind of the grand paradox of the search for knowledge in and of itself. But we really felt that, and we ultimately had to kind of embrace that and acknowledge it in the film. And I hope that in some very small way, our own unrequited, perhaps, love or curiosity for them could resonate with their grand unrequited love for volcanoes. But there's just a litany of questions that will remain unanswered, or that will torture me, that I have to accept. But Shane has said an answer in the past that I hope you'll share now, which really touches me about that.
Are you talking about groundhogs? No. I think for me there's a sense of, for Maurice and Katya, of, yeah, it goes back to an idea of the unknown for sure. But they had a way, what is?
Looking in the eyes.
Yeah, for me, I mean, volcanoes are a force of destruction. but they're also a force of creation. And I think Maurice and Katya went to the edge of that experience and found a kind of meaning, a kind of, I don't know if it was a spirituality, but a deep sense of purpose in that encounter. And they wanted more of it constantly. And at the same time, I think they recognized that the truth is found in totality and not in the instant, but in every instant. And that's really hard to communicate. And so for me, there isn't really a question that I would want to ask them, even though there are many questions I would want to ask them, but the thing I'd want to do is actually just to be able to look into their eyes, to be able to sit with their presence and have that transference of what it is like to be so fixated on and so in communion with creation.
Yeah. Just a couple more. I have no idea where we're at on time, but just a couple more questions. First of all, Miranda, Sarah told me that you have your own volcano story from Mount St. Helens. Is this right?
Okay, well, I'm not a volcanologist per se, but when I was 6, Mount St. Helens blew up, and we happened to be on a road trip in Idaho. And so there was ash everywhere, which was quite something for a 6-year-old, you know. And I gathered it up, and I had in my room, like, my prized possession was this jar of ash from Mount St. Helens. And like, someone would come over and I'd be like, here's my ash, you know, like. And I actually remember, I just was thinking about this, that in a game of truth or dare, a friend dared me to eat some of the ash, and I did. And so that's pretty deep. You guys
the volcano
made
is
this whole movie,
inside
but
you.
did you eat ash?
I did not.
Anyways, yeah, interesting to think, I don't know, that they were, was that one of the ones they were? Yeah, they were nearby.
That's amazing. Do you, Sarah, like, after I think working on this and doing something that is entirely built on the raw footage, does this influence your filmmaking going forward?
Oh, absolutely. I'll never see the world the same way, quite honestly, as after working on Fire of Love. There's something actually that's not in the film that Maurice said, which is that when he looks at a rock, he sees a life force and a memory, and that's because he has this knowledge of geologic time. He understands that a rock comes from liquid magma that hardens and forms this little boulder or pebble or a rock. Then it can be pulverized to sand, and then it can reform again into hardened stone. And I feel like they've gifted me that perspective, and just seeing the dynamism and again the aliveness in all things. I feel like that's deeply inspiring as a filmmaker, to get to know that there's unseen forces everywhere. And I feel like that's a grand challenge of cinema, is to make things that might seem invisible visible, but to bring them to life. So I think that whatever I do next will be infused with that kind of spirit.
And you as well, I assume.
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, it's, Sarah is a master, a paragon of this, but I think Maurice and Katya also reaffirmed the necessity of living for what you love. And I think that further inspires me, and I think for all of us on the team to continue to make work, not for any other reason than the fact that we love it.
That's beautiful. It really is. Thank you guys so much for this movie, for this film. It's absolutely incredible, and Miranda, your voice is like a part. It seems to emanate from the volcanoes themselves, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. I don't know. I feel like I don't want to leave, but I'm worried that. I guess the last question I'll ask, and then I'll let everybody go, is how will you remember this movie in sort of the history of your own work? Is it is it a love story? And is it a story about the search for meaning? Is it a story about the sort of vulnerability of human life? There's a moment towards the end of the film where they seem to almost come back to humanity with a contribution in terms of being able to sort of the work that they've done can save lives. How do you understand this work that you've created?
Wow, that is a beautiful question. I think it'll take me a while to fully come up with the right words for that, but I think briefly, I think that it's all of those things. I think it's a love story, it's a search for meaning, it's scientific inquiry, but it really makes me think about a line in the film that Miranda so beautifully voices, which is, when you could die at any moment, what do you leave behind? I feel like for me, I have my absolute dream job making documentary films, and I really think about, like what projects am I going to choose? What do I want to work on? Who do I want to work with? And this film has represented the culmination of everything I've dreamed of, working with such an incredible team, working on subject matter that challenged me deeply. This is the first archival film I've ever worked on, and it broke apart my sense of what it means to tell a story, and I'm so grateful for that. The challenges we encountered, we had to really wrestle with them to find the creative opportunities that just lay on the other side, and doing that has been such a gift in a learning process. But I'll just say, I feel like that line again, we could all die at any moment, so what are we going to leave behind? And getting to work on this film, it's taught me I want every film I work on from every point forward to be done with people I care about deeply, on subject matter that I love deeply. So maybe I feel that way about my work previous to this, but this is kind of a new culmination. So I guess that's kind of my messy answer to your really thoughtful question.
No, that's beautiful, and you've left behind a beautiful film. All of you have, and your colleagues have, and thank you for it. And happy Valentine's Day, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here.